So earlier today, I uploaded a video describing how infighting between House Republicans and Senate Republicans could potentially scuttle a $1.7 trillion omnibus bill primarily designed to fund the federal government through September of next year, thus triggering a government shutdown. And then about an hour after I uploaded the video, it was announced that the Senate passed it in their chamber, which would send it back to the House to pass it under Speaker Pelosi and the Democratic majority. So they heeded our wise counsel, and rightly so. But since this is the last major legislative victory for Democrats this year, and potentially for the rest of President Biden's term, because Republicans are going to take control of the House in January, I thought we would go over this very big, important bill. So Axios says Senate passes $1.7 trillion government funding bill. The Senate passed it on Thursday, 68 to 29. So 18 Republicans joined the 50 Democrats to pass this bill, sending the measure to the House for a quick passage before Friday's deadline. Because again, Pelosi is still running the show until January, which means even if not a single Republican in the House backs this bill, just on straight party lines, Pelosi has the votes to pass it for the Democrats. So the legislation will fund the government through next September, preventing the new Congress from being thrust into yet another spending fight when Republicans take control of the House. The success of Senate leadership in ushering this massive omnibus legislation officially closed the chapter on 2 rocky years of navigating with narrow majorities. And again, this can't be overstated. What President Biden, Speaker Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer were able to pull off despite razor-thin, stupid-thin majorities and a couple of renegade members and just, it's truly extraordinary. Biden has enjoyed the most legislatively successful 2 years or first term since President Johnson, right? It's just huge. Congress came close to being forced to kick spending negotiations into the new year, right? So when Republicans took control, and that would have been a disaster. As we talked about in that video that I uploaded earlier, Republicans are super eager, compared to even Democrats, to threaten government shutdown in order to get their way. Because again, they're really not interested in governance. They're interested in culture war and political stunts. And it's Democrats who have to assume the burden of running the gears of government, right? So they just don't care about jeopardizing government operations in the same way that Democrats do. But we avoided that, right? Because it's probably going to pass, tomorrow under Speaker Pelosi. So key provisions of this bill, right? It's primarily designed to fund the federal government, but it's called an omnibus bill, so there's more to it than just government funding. And one of them is, of course, $45 billion in aid to Ukraine's war effort and NATO allies, which was probably part of the reason that President Zelensky of Ukraine was in Washington yesterday and addressed Congress. A bipartisan deal to end a COVID-era Medicaid policy, provides more money to states and prevents them from dropping individuals from federally funded insurance, which is good. That keeps people insured, which is good for their health. The passage of the Electoral Count Act. Now, this is huge, right? So on January 6th, when the MAGA cult tried to install Trump as a dictator for life, there were discussions in the aftermath between Democrats and good faith Republicans, however few there may be, including, ironically, Mitch McConnell, saying that maybe we should go back and shore up the language of the Constitution, which describes, the role of the vice president in certifying an election. Now, to most constitutional scholars and historians and sane people, the language of the Constitution is pretty straightforward. It's not very, it basically says the vice president shall count the votes, right? So to a good faith actor, that's pretty clear. It doesn't leave any wiggle room for the vice president can do whatever the hell he wants, right? It's just you open the votes, you count the votes, you have your role is purely ministerial. You have no discretion, you get no say in anything. You open, you read, you move on. But the Electoral Count Act is apparently, included in this omnibus bill, and it's going to shore up the language. It's going to, include revisions to procedure on when and where and how people can object to elections. It's going to raise the threshold and the standard. So if you want to object to an election, you're going to have to bring your A game. You're going to have to get more support. And that's good. And hopefully it will reduce the likelihood that something like January 6th would ever happen again. It also includes more than $38 billion in emergency disaster assistance for Americans in the West and Southeast affected by recent natural disasters, including hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, and wildfires, which is good. We're seeing the effects of climate change in full force here. Florida was recently hit, and so I think North Carolina, South Carolina with a hurricane. Kentucky was hit with tornadoes, major tornadoes, twice since President Biden took office, and a lot of other states have been ravaged as well. So this is good. $2.6 billion in funding for January 6 legal efforts, including assistance to further support prosecution relating to the attack on the Capitol, and $11.3 billion for the FBI's efforts to curb extremist violence and domestic terrorism. Again, this is good. It will hopefully make the country a much more secure place by beefing up the FBI's capabilities. Tax provisions aimed at preventing fraudulent tax breaks arising from land conservation deals, a 4.6% pay raise for military troops, and 22.4% increase in support for Veteran Administration medical care. Jon Stewart would be pleased, right? This is good because the VA is often, I don't want to say reviled, but highly criticized, and I think understandably so, for the bureaucracy, the red tape, and its lack of care for our veterans. So this is good. Nearly a quarter, 25% increase in support for their administration. That's good. Banning TikTok on federal devices. Okay. Let's see. After the attack on Speaker Pelosi's husband, it looks like they included directs U.S. Capitol Police to consider extending security, additional $25 million for National Labor Relations budget, which is a top priority for unions, it says, and brings their funding to nearly $300 million. This is a big one. More funding for children's mental health and for substance abuse. I mean, we're seeing, especially during COVID, but even before COVID, an increase in the mental health crises of youth, of younger people, and obviously an increase in substance abuse, especially with the influx of opioids in this country. $576 million for the EPA, $8 billion for the Child Care and Development Block Grant. So yeah, this is big stuff. As I said, it's the last major legislative victory for Democrats because, again, House Republicans are less likely to play ball than Senate Republicans have been. Hopefully that'll change, but unless the public really compels Republicans to come to the table in good faith, I think we can expect just, one series of politically motivated investigations after another. Hunter Biden investigations, Afghanistan investigations. I think the Republicans will continue to do what they have and just not be interested in policy. So this is a big deal. I'm glad that Democrats and the handful of good faith Republicans were able to pull it off. Good way to end the 2022 legislative year. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe. Also, my link tree is in the description below, so if you have a sec, go ahead and share the love on all my social media accounts. Also, if you want to express an opinion, eternal devotion, or undying contempt, go ahead and leave a comment because we're always looking for feedback. And on that note, I look forward to pondering politics and pop culture again with you very soon.